Hey y'all, I'm gonna roast some coffee today, so come along with me. Roaster preheated. I have preheated it to the highest temperature, which is 260 degrees Celsius. So I'm gonna add in my beans. Today I'm roasting some Brazilian beans. Let's see, I'll show you Brazil. Let's see, Areté Oliveira Nito, perhaps is the way that's pronounced. I'm not sure. Okay, here we go. Now, one thing that I'm doing this time that I haven't done before is preheating my roaster. All right, so when you first introduce your beans into your preheated roaster, what will happen is the beans that are at room temperature will pull the heat from the roaster. The roaster is much higher temperature, so as the beans pull the heat from the roaster, the temperature will appear to go down, the temperature of the roaster. And that is the beans pulling the energy from the room temperature beans pulling the heat energy away. So, I do not know the density of this coffee, but the density of your coffee will affect your turning point and rate of rise. The turning point of coffee is when the beans have caught up to the temperature of the roaster and start to increase their temperature higher than the initial temperature of the inside of the roaster. Now, since this roaster doesn't show me the temperature, I can set the temperature, but I don't know exactly the internal temperature. Our roasting curve is defined by the temperature versus the time. So you will see a curve, a downward slope as the temperature goes down and then starts to come back up. I'm already smelling the drying process. So what happens is the beans take up the temperature, they rise up, and then they start to increase, and you hit your drying stage. Now, none of the drying stage affects the flavor of the coffee. That is the endothermic reaction. The state of the coffee absorbing the energy is the stage of the moisture coming out of the bean and evaporating. So, there are other reactions taking place at this time, but they're not chemical reactions where you have the molecules that are breaking down. So what we're doing now is we're preparing the coffee to take on chemical reactions, which are the exothermic reactions. Those are the reactions that you will see. So the exothermic reactions is when you start to see the yellowing. And then you know the coffee has dried out and it's ready for the chemical reactions, which is when the smell changes from the grass to the hay. And if you've seen any of my previous videos, you'll hear me talk about how it starts to smell like green grass, and then it starts to smell like hay, grass that's dried out. And then we hit into the browning phase, which brings out more of a baked smell, which I think we're going to be hitting now because I'm already seeing browning. Are you seeing any, let's see, are you seeing any browning on the beans? I'm seeing some that are looking darker. So as the coffee heated up and the moisture from within the bean is released and evaporated, the drying has happened and now we're into the yellowing stage. So after the yellowing stage is complete, we hit first crack. And after first crack, the coffee can be consumed. And then after the first crack, that's the development stage, first and second crack. So we are right now seeing browning. So that's also called the Maillard effect, when the chemical reactions in the bean are happening. and it's the caramelization and development of the bean. All right, so let me talk a little bit about the Brazilian beans. I got these from Sweet Maria's. I have a subscription that they send me 4 pounds every 2 months. And so they just send samples of things so that I can try all different origins. And I don't know if you'll notice this, but it's bright. It's looking bright, it's looking yellow, and into the light brown stage. And I'm smelling the difference here. So, they recommend to roast this to city to full city. Now that's talking about how dark to roast it. It says pleasant flavors of simple brown sugars, mild apple-like acidity, crisp Bartlett pear note, subtle sweet herbals, and an aromatic quality to the cup. So, when you roast this coffee to the specifications that they did and taste it, you will get those same flavor notes. When I roast this coffee, I will roast it potentially different and could get some of the same flavors, or I could get I might not get some of the same flavors. So some of that depends. This description is showing the opportunity that we have to bring out these characteristics that they noticed in this bean. Let me talk a little bit about Brazil. Brazil has been the world's largest producer of coffee for more than 150 years. Currently, Brazil grows around 1/3 of the world's coffee, although in the past its market share was as high as 80%. Coffee was introduced to Brazil from French Guiana in 1727, while Brazil was still under Portuguese rule. The first coffee in Brazil was planted by Francisco de Melo Paulista in the region of Para in the north of the country. According to the myth, Paulista traveled to French Guiana on a diplomatic mission, seduced the wife of the governor there, and was given the seeds hidden in a bouquet from her on his departure. The coffee he planted on his return home was probably used just for domestic consumption, and it remained a relatively unimportant crop until it began to work its way south, being passed from garden to garden as much as from farm to farm as a crop. So that's the story behind how coffee came to Brazil. And I love those stories. Better Brazilian coffees tend to be low in acidity, heavy in body, and sweet, often with chocolate and nutty flavors. So different origins with their different growing environments tend to have different characteristics in their beans based on the environment in which they're grown and the plants that are there. And Brazil is a very good, stable origin coffee. Alright, so now we're definitely into the light toasty brown. We should be hearing first crack anytime. Another tidbit from Brazil. It is undeniably the most advanced and industrialized coffee producing country in the world. With a focus on yield and production, it has not been retained a great reputation for producing coffees of the highest quality. Most large farms employ relatively crude picking techniques, such as strip picking, where the entire branch is stripped of its cherries in one go. If the plantations are large and flat, common in Brazil's larger coffee farms, they use harvesting machines to shake the cherries loose from the branches. Neither method takes ripeness into consideration, and as a result, there can be a large number of unripe cherries in the harvested coffee. So that will give a different flavor profile, obviously. As I was saying that, I heard the sizzling of the water and the condensation against the heated plate of the roaster. Now, my ambient temperature out here is pretty chilly, and that does affect a lot with the way the coffee roasts. So we need to bear that in mind. If you get a roaster and roast coffee at home, you'll want to consider your ambient temperature and humidity. They can play a huge impact on the way the coffee is roasting, whether it's roasting quicker or slower. We don't want to over roast the outside of the coffee and have it underdeveloped on the inside. So we can adjust the temperature, we can adjust the time, and in many machines, you can adjust the airflow. And that gives you a lot of variables to play with on what you want to do with your bean development. All right, let's see what else we can learn about Brazil as we wait for that initial first crack. All right, there are many different coffee varieties grown across Brazil, and many of them were developed in the country or evolved there, including Mundo Novo, Yellow Bourbon, Caturra, and Catuai. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but the population is 207,350,000. The number of 60 kilograms bags in 260 was 55 million. So a 60 kilogram bag is 132 pounds. So 55 million, 132 pound bags. That's a lot of coffee. I'm looking for the coffee that we are roasting on the map. Potentially I can find it for you. We are in Mito. Essentially, probably this map is not as detailed as I would need. I heard a crack, so we have our first crack. And the smell is much smokier. Let's see. All right, so Brazil has been actively trying to increase its internal coffee consumption with increasing success. While giving children coffee at school from a young age may raise some eyebrows, the consumption in Brazil now rivals that of the United States. No raw coffee can be imported into Brazil, which means that a large percentage of the coffee grown in Brazil is consumed there. Though generally the quality of coffee for domestic consumption is lower than that for export. Coffee bars have appeared throughout the major cities, though the price of coffee in these places is similar to better coffee bars in the United States and Europe. So they have become another symbol of the increasing divide between the rich and poor in Brazil. Isn't that interesting? Another fact here, by 1920s, Brazil was producing 80% of the world's coffee, and coffee financed a huge amount of the infrastructure in the country. This unabated production led to a massive surplus of coffee that would only exacerbate the damage of the crash during the Great Depression in the 1930s. Brazil's government ended up burning around 78 million bags of stockpiled coffee in an effort to invigorate coffee prices, though it had little effect on them. During World War II, there was growing concern that in the U.S. that with the European markets shut off, declining coffee prices could drive Central and South American countries towards Nazi or communist sympathy. So in an attempt to stabilize the price of coffee, an international agreement was drawn up based on a quota system. This agreement drove up the price of coffee until it stabilized in the mid-1950s and is considered a precursor to the much wider International Coffee Agreement signed in 1962, which would come to encompass 42 producing countries. Quotas were fixed according to the indicator coffee price determined by the International Coffee Organization. If prices dropped, then quotas were reduced, and if prices climbed, then quotas were increased. So this agreement lasted till 1989, when it broke down after Brazil refused to accept a reduction in its quota. Brazil believed that it was an extremely efficient producer and could prosper outside of the agreement. The result of the breakdown of the ICA was unregulated market and prices dropped dramatically over the following 5 years, resulting in the coffee crisis that would inspire the fair trade movement within coffee production. So that is some history that is, to me, fascinating. So now we have the standards where coffee will give a fair trade, and the power of consumer and producers are more balanced, but it's not been that way through time. Now I should also state, this coffee is the Arabica coffee, but there's also another coffee that is called Robusta. And Brazil is one of the world's primary producers of the Robusta, along with Arabica. In Brazil, Robusta is usually called Carnelian and is produced in regions such as Rondônia. Now, Robusta is known to be hardier. It grows on lower elevations, but it tends to be not meet the requirements of specialty coffee, most specialty coffee. That's not to say that Robusta is bad and Arabica is good, but overall, a lot of Robusta is used in low quality commercial coffee. I'll just say it that way. Don't want to hate on Robusta too much, but that is a thing. So, I'm reading from The World Atlas of Coffee by James Hoffmann. It's a great book if you want to pick it up. It's got a lot of fascinating coffee things in there for all you coffee lovers and coffee nerds such as myself. Let's see. I wish you could smell this. I know I say that every time. It's starting to get nice and dark. I'm going to lift this up and see if you can see. It's definitely past first crack. I'm going to push it further. If you have seen any of my previous videos, you know me and how I love that dark roast coffee. I know people always say, the fancy schmancy coffee artisans say that I'm roasting away the nuances of the origin beans, but I just love my dark roast, so that's why I'm roasting it for myself at home. And you can do the same thing. It's really fun. It's really cool. So I know that you can see all the papery stuff. That's chaff, and it's that part that's surrounding the bean, and as it cooks, it comes off. And that's highly flammable, so if you are on a bigger roaster, you want to make sure to clean it regularly. I clean my roaster detailedly each time, but for those bigger commercial drum roasters, the chaff can ignite, and you can have fires started easily that way. I'm looking at getting a bullet roaster. They are around $3,000. They have a drum roaster. They're a drum roaster, but they are also electric. They aren't gas, which I'm wanting. They roast about a kilogram or more each batch, and you can do back-to-back batches. It also has roast profile technology that you can hook up your computer and get your roast profile information. So that would be super duper helpful to know the actual internal temperature based on the time and be studying the roast profile. I think I'm hearing second crack. It's kind of a snapping sound. It's a softer sound than the initial first crack. So I'm looking into getting a bullet roaster and being able to roast more coffee at once, being able to do what you would do on a commercial roaster, just on a smaller scale. This roaster is great, but I'm to the place where I'd like to have more control of the variables of temperature and airflow. But I have been really enjoying this roaster. Oh, do you hear that? That is the little snapping sound of the second crack. Check again and see how dark it's getting. It's getting nice. Yeah, I love that. You can let me know in the comments what you think of the lighter versus the darker roast. Would you stop it at this point, or would you let it keep going? I'm gonna let it keep going. I like to roast until I see the beans becoming oily. But it's getting close. I know that when I lift off the lid, it lets a whole lot of the heat out, so I'm probably not going to try to do that too much. We're at about 21 minutes into the roast. I haven't adjusted the temperature. I've just kept it at the highest temp. And I know that if I lower the temperature in the development stages, that I can potentially slow down the roast and bring out some different flavors and aspects. And then I can go ahead and roast different consecutive batches with different settings and taste them next to each other and see the differences, which is really cool. And I'll do a video at some point about how to cup coffee. Cupping coffee is how you taste it. Oh, it's smelling amazing. This is so much fun. Roasting coffee is so much fun. I just said I wasn't going to lift up the lid, and there I'm doing it. But one thing that I do like about this is that you can be so close to the coffee while it's roasting. You can see it, you can smell it. When you have a bigger commercial roaster, you have a trier, which is a little tube that you can pull out and look at the beans and smell them. But that's just a small portion. I'm getting to watch it happen, which is why I love this roaster, this process so much. And which is why I wanted to use this kind of a roaster I've been using it for over a year. And that's given me the ability to see and smell and hear what's going on with the beans over and over and over again through these roasts. And roasting coffee is science. It is mathematical, but it's also very sensory. So you have to get a good feel for it. And it just takes experience and time. But it's a fun thing to do. I'm going to lift it up again. I think I'm going to be done soon. It's getting there. It's getting real close. And it's a really cold, I say really cold. I'm from North Dakota and Montana, so this is not really cold. But it is a chilly temperature out here. I'm thinking it's around 40 degrees, so that's just a big difference compared to the inside of the roaster. Yeah, I think it's there. I think it really is. All right. So now I'm going to shut this off, take this off, pour them out. Okay, and then I'm going to shake it and separate the chaff and cool down my beans. So since I've roasted it, I want to stop the roasting process in its tracks. So I'm going to go shake this out. And thanks for roasting with me. Have a good day.